I want to give this, and I don't know how to say this. For those of you who've paid any attention to Jung, or you've paid any attention to archetypes, or the overriding Buddha, and though at Vajra Vidya, the temple that I'm so aligned to, I talked to them about it, and they don't relate to it. But it came to me, so this is why I'm sharing it with you. And then I read just recently a book written by Lama Yeshe, and we used to go to his center in California. I can't remember the name of it now. Rajapani. I want to say Vajra Yogini, Rajapani. And he had a whole chapter on the Maitreya. And I had an experience that the Maitreya just entered, and it entered my life and entered my body. And I didn't know really too much about it, just a real vague kind of understanding. It's the next Buddha, it's the overriding Buddha. And it doesn't mean you have to be a Buddhist. It just means that that's the influence. Just like the fourth Buddha was all about understanding the mind and taking that apart and really seeing what was true and what wasn't true and all of that. So this Buddha is without gender. I think that's beautiful, because that's what many of us are exploring at this particular time. The whole trance, the whole thing is sort of dissolving these very definite roles of gender. And the attributes is the love and compassion. So that's why it's starting to be like emphasized so much, is what's the heart, and how are the mind and the heart combined, and the heart actually is the master and the mind is the servant, because that influence is coming on the planet as the overriding Buddha. And one of the bridges, I guess you would call it, is when you begin to realize your nature, one of the things that comes clearly, and it usually takes a while, I'm speaking of my own experience, maybe you're different, is the sense of we are interconnected. There's nothing that we're not connected to. And that interconnection, the way to really kind of realize that, and for most of us it happens spontaneously, it doesn't work out real well for being good spiritual people praying for other people. It's an understanding that you begin to pray for all beings. You begin to send forth your realization and all of the years and eons of time that you've dedicated to self-realization and living from that. You pray that and give that to others in your prayers and in your meditations. So he gave this very, very simple, it's called the Maitreya blessing. And so I'm going to give that. And it's a very accelerated way to realize that it just isn't this separate little me doing all the things it needs to do to wake up and to be whatever your idea about waking up is. It actually is realized that you are a part of it all. And what is realized here is giving out to all beings to contribute to all beings. And if you're more Christian oriented, it's prayers. This is, a very Buddhist sort of orientation of blessing. But I call it the Maitreya blessing. And I use it because it speaks here. But you'll find your own. But it's not being so self-involved. It's sending forth the goodness and the well-being and the blessings to everyone is the most profound act anyone can do right now. And then you get off your meditation cushion and you serve in the best way that you are wired up to serve. And it's all perfectly in place. So again, just, if you're laying on the floor, then just feel the body, how it's supported by the floor. It's almost like the floor kind of comes up and enters the back, the flesh, the skin. It kind of, that boundary disappears. And the boundary really is an imagined boundary. We have no, definite lines. Here's my body and then here's the air. Here are my hips and then there's the chair. It all kind of dissolves into one another. If you're sitting in a chair, the same. The hips, they kind of go down into the cushion of the chair, and the cushion starts to kind of rise up and comes up into the flesh, the hips, the legs. And there's that sense of being held, being supported. My teacher calls it living from the platform. That's a very sort of practical description. You're held, but you're held rather than by what you would perhaps perceive as a ground or a platform. You're held because it's who you are, it's your nature. And so that dark, nourishing, unimaginably benevolent presence, it enters, and doesn't enter, it is discovered that it's all through your body, mind. The whole thing is infused and held and informed and nourished by this dark, silent ground. That's taking your seat. And then you can feel that there's a relaxation in it. Whether you had the perfect mother that, you were transmitted, that you were loved and supported by the earth and the world, or you were just kind of thrown out in the cold and it's like, good luck, hang on. It doesn't really matter. You can say, yes, that was this experience, but the actuality. And so then it's almost like you fall into what has always been the cosmic mother, that is the source of abundance, the source of health, the source of insight, the source of everything. And that's moving through and expressing through your cells in the body. It's not like a airy-fairy spiritual idea. It's the actuality. It's more actual than the memory of your influences in your incarnation. It's actually much more fundamental. You get that one going and the whole thing reharmonizes. And I can tell you that of my own experience. And so there's just this sense of ease. The back kind of relaxes, and that place behind it's behind kind of like the waist where the torso comes into the hips. In most bodies, there's a kind of a tension of trying to hold yourself up. And often we try to hold ourselves up by our shoulders and our neck. But actually we're trying to hold ourselves up by our head. the contents of our thoughts. That's what we're trying to hold ourselves up with. So you just let that go. It's just let it go. And experience, not in some intellectual kind of hoping or dreaming, but actually experience the infusion of the power and the strength and the foundation that love arises and creates herself in the myriad form. That's what's holding you up. That's what's moving and informing and transmuting and clearing constantly. There's this great intelligence, the Tibetans call the Great Mother the wisdom, because out of that arising is the guidance of how this body works and survives, and the seasons move, and the moon goes through its phases, and the tides move. All of that comes from wisdom, and the wisdom comes from the Great Mother. And it's not a gender, it's a beingness. It's the globality that all are held in and nourished and informed from. So the spine is a very beautiful, and all traditions call the spine the central channel. And even in some of the indigenous traditions, like the great trees, if you've ever been to the redwoods, you can sense that there's this channel that goes infinitely deep into the ground, and then it comes up through the center of this magnificent and ancient tree, and it goes up through, and all the branches come out from that, and then it reaches the sky. And you are no less than that. The axis mundi, the great channel that goes through the earth, the tree of life. So we are just, these bodies are kind of like a replica that just keeps repeating itself over and over and over in nature. All those channels that the great healers discovered, the nadis and the currents through the body, and all the acupuncture points, and all of that is it just repeats itself through the body, the veins, the rivers, the creeks, the rocks, the mountains, the space, the vast sky. You are all of that. You are made up of that. You wouldn't exist if this were not true. You are a creation of the Mother, arising from that is the infinite benevolence and the womb of everything. That's where the power, and if you want to call it the worthiness, actually arises. It moves through the memories that said otherwise, that you weren't worthy, or you made a mistake, or you're guilty over this or that, or not enough, whatever the voices say. But if you truly come into what appears to be the invisible, which is the power, the current, the channels, the connection to these unimaginable realms of wisdom and creation, of light and beyond and beyond and beyond, and to the great sun. And even the great golden sun, there's a sun behind the sun, which is the black sun. So it's replicated even in the most infinite, infinite, infinite expressions of the self. It just repeats itself over and over and over and over. We are such a part of it all. To feel alone or afraid or cut off is the greatest tragedy of the human experience. So out of this great golden sun that all are nourished and held and permeated and created and dissolved and created and dissolved and created and dissolved infinitely, and all equally are nourished and created and dissolved. There isn't one form that's left out. Benevolence is just not even close to the actuality when you open up to who you are. The rest that seems to have been left out, not a part of this, then is touched and turns towards the central sun and is transmuted and resolved. And that dream of guilt or not enough or victimhood or whatever it is will be no more. It's dissolved in this great, equal, unfathomable, unimaginable, undescribable radiance. The golden radiance. And so just sense, in whatever way that is intimate for you, just sense this sense of, it's like a being that comes out of the central sun. You know, it's like the unformed, the radiance of the sunlight. It contains all the forms and permeates all the forms, but nothing really, sort of stands out. It's all one expression of itself. So just for a moment, imagine that something begins to form out of the central sun. And it's what is intimate for you. For some, it's like a solar angel. It's what it kind of has a sense of. Or for others, it's perhaps there's a sense of a Buddha-like image that comes and forms itself. For others, it's just this beautiful, radiant, infinite presence that forms itself. So make it intimate for you. Make it that it means something to you. And then as it comes out of the central sun and it enters to the top of the crown, the head, and it comes down through the spine, the central channel, and it bursts forth through the heart. And it's just the central sun now with this beautiful, unique formation, intimate for you, bursts forth. The great Maitreya. And the Maitreya really does not belong to a particular tradition. The Maitreya is an evolutionary expression arising upon our beautiful planet, and therefore through the whole universe, but especially within our planet. The heart is the way of what's arising. It's deeply rooted and deeply stable in the infinite stillness, the eternal stillness that all arises from the Godhead, and it arises and spills forth in the heart, the central sun, and takes the form and the power and the infinite glory of the great Maitreya, genderless, without beginning, without end, forevermore, life-giving, and made up of love and compassion. And nothing and no one is left out of this. And as it pours forth, and there can be, maybe a specific kind of vision, that there's 10 points, 10 spokes that come out of the heart that then pours forth. For others, perhaps it's like unformed. It's just this radiance. It's like looking in the center of the sun, and it's just this golden, astonishing radiance that pours forth infinitely, forevermore, forevermore, forevermore. And it pours forth just like the sun. It doesn't decide who gets the radiant transmission of love and compassion or who doesn't, who deserves and who doesn't. It just pours forth because that is the actual reality. And one begins to live from the actual reality of it all. And then the harmony that's inherent in this central sun, this pouring forth, the radiant heart, then begins to reharmonize both the individual and what appears to be happening upon the planet. It truly does contribute and reharmonizes. And the life truly does reharmonize. There is no other outcome. And so as it pours forth for all of those that have not received this. All places that are war-torn or starvation or rape or murder or homelessness or deep in pain or ill, or there is no qualification. One is more important than the other. You may find that just opening up, that it is perhaps drawn to something that appears to be a little bit more specific. A friend that's in deep pain or fear, or a part of the planet that's especially in hell, living a hell realm. But it's the giving of itself without ending, without qualification, like living in the sunlight. It's just pouring forth, because that's what it is. It's the source of everything. Source of life, the source of wisdom, the source of power, the source of goodness, innate goodness. And it just pours forth and pours forth and pours forth and pours forth. Perhaps there's a certain image that comes forward, and let that be totally permeated by this love. this infinite love. And perhaps it's just a sense of what's pouring forth and what it is touching is one whole, beauteous, unlimited source of life. So experience that, and perhaps throughout the day, as you go down the hill and you have your wonderful lunch, and you may swim in the river or rest, whatever, let that, just that sense of this in you, in your physicality, in the cells of your body, in your heart, just let it pour forth. Fill up and pour forth. Fill up and pour forth. Forevermore. The great blessing, the great Maitreya, the overriding deity of the planet, and her evolution. She's a living being, just like we perceive ourselves to be. And there's evolution in her, as there evolution is within this individuation. It's all the same. We're all a part of it, and no one ever is left out. It's impossible. There can be degrees of receiving, this is true, but not the pouring forth, the blessing. So perhaps during the day, when you're home, certain things are coming up on the internet or the news, or someone's talking about some hell realm on the planet. Just open up and let it pour forth and touch. You don't have to be militaristic about it. It can be very private, very quiet. As you're walking past perhaps someone that you can sense that's distressed, just pour it forth. It's the blessing, the Maitreya blessing, the overriding archetype on the planet at this time. And you are the vehicle for that blessing to flow through. Step up to it. As it flows through you, as this unique individuation, it also blesses and awakes every cell within your body. And because it's made up of harmony and power and the essence of life, the body and the life will respond to it as you're pouring forth with what looks perhaps calling in greater need, like parts of the world in great suffering. You are included in this. Give it full permission. There is no fear here. It doesn't exist.